Hello and welcome from the Oyster side of the screen. Oh, shucks, that was a silly pun. Thanks everyone for tuning into tonight's event. We promise that it will not be lackluster and that you will learn a lot about climate change. Oh man, I'm sorry, I owe you an apology for these terrible oyster puns. Let's get shucking. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final installment of the second season of the Winter Oyster webinar series presented by ORP and Mom's Organic Market. I'm your host, Allison Albert Gercio. I'm the marketing manager with Oyster Recovery Partnership. And we're here tonight to learn about oysters and climate change. So thank you for joining us. And before we get into the good details, I want to cover some webinar housekeeping. So next slide, please. Okay, we will be offering live captioning for this event. So please turn it on in your webinar toolbar at the bottom of your screen if you want that. The broadcast is being recorded and we will post it on our YouTube channel tomorrow. Participants, your lines are muted and your cameras are turned off. Sorry. So please ask your questions using the Q&A portal, which is also at the bottom of your screen. So don't ask us questions in the chat because we'll probably miss them. Thank you so much. All right, next slide, please. We, of course, want to acknowledge our fantastic sponsor, Mom's Organic Market, who has been a great long-term partner of ORP's. They participate in our mission, doing everything from shell recycling to employee engagement like hatchery tours. And we actually have a mom's rep on the call, so I'm going to let him cover all the great ways that ORP supports us and just say a big thank you. And move on to the next slide. All right, so just a little bit about ORP before we dive into the presentation. We are the nonprofit expert in Chesapeake Bay oyster restoration. We are working hard to restore the Bay's native oyster population by building sanctuary reefs, replenishing public fishery reefs, supporting the oyster aquaculture industry, recycling oyster shell, and of course, getting the public involved with hands-on volunteering and events. And since our founding in 1994, and with the support of some major restoration partners like the Maryland Department of Natural Resources and the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science Horn Point Laboratory, we have planted more than 10 billion oysters and recycled more than 280,000 bushels of oyster shell. That's amazing, incredible, a lot, and there's still plenty of work to do. So we are excited and we are here for it, and we will continue working for as long as it takes. Next slide, please. So just a few ways that you can get involved in our mission, and we hope that you will. You can support us by making a donation, shopping ours and our partners' merchandise on our website. Of course, buying local seafood from Mom's Organic Market, and eating oysters at home and making sure that those shells get recycled. So please visit our website to learn more about the ways that you can get involved. Okay, so next slide, please. And I think we're gonna kick off our poll. Yes, okay. So this poll question is related to oysters and climate change. And the question should pop up on your screen shortly. Oh, maybe we're having technical difficulties. Well, let's see. While you are considering your answer, actually, I don't know. Is it up? I can't tell. Oh, no. All right, well, let's just move on. So we are going to randomly select one of you attendees as a giveaway winner at the end of the presentation tonight. And that giveaway winner is going to receive a $50 Mom's gift card and an ORP hat or sweatshirt. Oh, no, I misspoke. T-shirt of your choice. So thank you so much. Maybe our presenter Jennica can bring that poll up for us later if we get it working. But without further ado, let's meet our speakers and the people who are behind the scenes tonight, bringing this webinar to life. So first, I want to acknowledge Kaylee Fleury, our events and marketing coordinator, who is behind the scenes with all the controls, making sure that things appear when they're supposed to. We also have Olivia Caretti, ORP's Coastal Restoration Program Manager, who will be chiming in later when we get to Q&A. And our presenter tonight is Jennica Moffat. She is relatively new to ORP. She is our monitoring coordinator. And I just want to there's Jennica. Hey, Jennica, how's it going? Thanks for joining.
Hello.
Yeah, give everybody some quick background on how you landed at ORP.
Yeah, so as Allison mentioned, I'm pretty new at ORP. I started in September of last year. My background is in estuarine ecology, but actually in the estuary on the other side of the country in California, where I worked in the upper San Francisco estuary. I studied community ecology, looking at how populations are responding long-term to natural and human-induced stressors. And so I have now moved from one estuary to another to working in the Chesapeake Bay, and I am now leading ORP's monitoring program to help us adaptively manage our restoration efforts.
Thank you so much. Okay, Jennica, we're gonna take you off screen for a minute, and I'm gonna introduce our mom's representative, Sean Lynch, who's here with us tonight. Sean is the Environmental Research and Partnerships Manager at MOMS. And Sean, if you're ready, I'm going to pass you the torch and let you take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Allison. I'm really excited to be here tonight. As Allison mentioned, I'm the Environmental Research and Partnership Manager for Mom's Organic Market. And I'm just going to give a quick overview of our partnership with ORP. So we've been hugely enthusiastic partners with ORP since 2019. And we partner with ORP to recycle oysters at oyster shells at our DC, Maryland, Virginia, and Philadelphia area stores. So you can bring your shells to any of our locations to contribute to building new oyster reefs in the Bay. And from our 4+ years of partnership, MOMS has recycled 81,000 shells. And we're really proud to be a partner with ORP to contribute to reseeding the Bay with oysters. And since this is on climate change tonight, I'll just mention a few words. So MOMS works to solve climate change in many ways. We use on-site solar and wind renewable energy credits to power all of our stores. We also have an extensive bulk section, reducing the need for packaging. And we offer all organic produce. And every year we divert tons of compost and recycling from going into the landfill and entering the waste stream. And we provide EV charging at all of our locations. So, all right, well, thanks for listening to me for a moment. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, because I'll be on at the end for the panel to answer any questions. And I'm now going to pass the reins over to the ORP scientist, Jennica Moffat.
Thanks, John. Haley, I think you got to give, there we go. Thank you. All right, thanks, John. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm Jennica Moffat, monitoring coordinator, ORP. Really excited to talk to you guys today about our final webinar on oysters and climate change. And today we will be covering these topics here. We'll be talking about some of the ecosystem services that oysters provide, some of the coastal challenges that communities face due to climate change, how climate change is affecting oysters, some cascading impacts of climate change effects, And then finish off with some good news of how oysters are adapting to climate change or can adapt to climate change and how they can help us adapt to climate change. Just a reminder that if you have any questions, be sure to put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end of the talk. Next slide, please. So oysters are key to coastal ecosystems. They provide a variety of ecosystem services. They are mighty filter feeders. They improve water quality by feeding on suspended particles and nutrients in the water. They also create habitat through creating these 3D structures via growth and settlement that provides habitat for fish like striped bass and oyster toadfish and sheep's head and all the fish we love, as well as other invertebrates like blue crabs, as well as other oysters. And then they provide food for important estuary organisms such as blue crabs, and then as well as for humans. Oysters also provide significant economic and cultural value to Chesapeake Bay. Chesapeake Bay has a historic oyster fishery that goes back as early as 2500 BC, and of course continuing through today. The 2021 dockside value of oysters was valued at $10 million. So they are providing a lot of economic value to Chesapeake Bay. The aquaculture industry is also incredibly important and is growing very rapidly. And of course, many coastal Chesapeake Bay communities are tied to oysters and working the water. And so they provide a cultural importance as well. And so eating local oysters can help support these communities. So despite these ecological and economic values, oysters face multiple stressors from natural and human-induced threats. And today we'll be discussing how climate change is already and may in the future impact oysters, as well as some of the benefits that oysters can still provide us despite these threats and help us to adapt. Next slide. So we all know that we live in a rapidly changing world. The Chesapeake Bay is experiencing some of the greatest effects of climate change in the United States. And these changes and impacts come in many forms, and impacts can be really variable. So this is a photo of Annapolis from late October 2021, when there was pretty extreme flooding at 5 feet above high tide level, where you can see it flooded Main Street in Annapolis. This storm was the 4th largest storm surge recorded in recorded history. But there have been and continue to be several smaller flooding events happen regularly. A combination of rising seas and these more intense storms are changing where water goes into the bay and at what volume, and can have major impacts on human infrastructure, such as cities and farms, and can cause threats to national security, defense, and transportation. Next slide, please. So climate change challenges the Chesapeake Bay in many different ways. Some of the ways are kind of demonstrated in this infographic here and include storms that are more frequent and or more intense, increased nutrient runoff, sea level rise, changes in water chemistry, such as ocean acidification that is a result of increased carbon dioxide being deposited in the water, increased nutrient loading into the bay from heavy rains, as well as freshening of the bay as heavy rains increase runoff, such as that large storm that we just talked about in 2019. And when these are combined with other stressors, such as shoreline development and overfishing, this can create additive challenges for coastal communities and ecosystems. Next slide, please. And unfortunately, oysters are not exempt from the threats of climate change. So next, we're going to talk about how oysters are threatened by climate change in a few major ways. Next slide, please. So oysters require a pH of about 7.8 to 8.2 to form shells and grow through a process called biocalcification. And so as more carbon dioxide increases in the air, it is absorbed by the ocean and the estuary, which leads to lower pH, which means more acidic water and less molecules available for oysters to form shells. And so if the pH is too low, in kind of the most extreme cases, shells can even dissolve due to really acidic waters. This photo that you see right now on the screen is from a study conducted by NOAA, Northeast Fisheries Science Center, where they grew oysters at different pH levels. The shell on the right is under normal pH range of about 7.8, and you can see it looks like a healthy oyster, whereas the oysters on the left were grown under lower pH or acidic conditions, representing projected acidifying waters. The shells that were grown in these acidic conditions are whiter, which indicates that they are thinner compared to the healthy oyster on the right. And just a note about these ranges, that although a drop from 7.8 to 7.3, which is that what the oysters on the left were grown at, seems small, this 0.5 drop in pH is actually 3 times more acidic water. Although we're not seeing these levels right now, these are projected over the long term with climate change. Next slide, please. So another threat of climate change to oysters is an increase in flooding. General changes in weather patterns are leading to years with higher than average rainfall and or more intense storms. So this photo that you see here is an image of Chesapeake Bay from late summer 2019 during that large storm event that we've touched on already. The Chesapeake Bay watershed had rainfall during that late 2018 to early 2019 that was higher than ever recorded, and increased runoff drained into the Chesapeake Bay and caused a great freshening of almost the entire bay. It drops the salinity of the bay almost all the way down to the bottom of the Maryland border. And these low salinities not only were extreme, but they lasted a really long time. And they persisted for 17 months. And so all of the oysters in the Chesapeake Bay were exposed to long-term stress in the form of this fresh water. And a drop in salinity can be really stressful for oysters because it can kill them or keep them from spawning, which will limit reproduction and oysters population ability to recover after these events. So oysters require a salinity of at least 10 parts per thousand to spawn. And so this long-term exposure to fresh water can greatly reduce oyster reproduction. The other thing you might note in this image is this expansive sediment plume that kind of extends down most of the bay. That plume extends almost to the southern Maryland border. And the threat of sedimentation is that it can bury reefs as that sediment settles. And this can cause wide-ranging impacts to oyster populations. Additionally, freshwater also brings disease and can reduce oysters' ability to resist disease. Next slide. And disease can also be increased by warming waters. So a combination of fresh water and warming waters can greatly increase disease in oyster populations because oysters living in warmer waters are also more susceptible to disease. So the image on the top right here shows 2 oysters. The one on the right is infected with dermo, comparing an oyster on the left that is a healthy oyster. And dermo is common, and it's even more common during drought and warmer years. And it does not kill oysters outright, but they have a harder time growing, they don't live as long, and they have less meat inside of them. The bottom image here is just showing some infected cells in oysters. In addition to disease, warmer waters also hold less oxygen. So currently the Chesapeake Bay experiences a dead zone or an area with low to no oxygen every summer. And as waters continue to warm with climate change, this will expand the size and length of time that dead zones occur, which could impact oysters, especially because they can't move as they don't have the ability to move, so they can't escape these low oxygen conditions. Next slide, please. So with the combination of these impacts, we are starting to see cascading impacts that can result in a loss of oysters, which will lead to a loss of ecosystem functions and services that I talked about at the beginning. Increased disease and poor water quality can lead to shellfish closures where oysters can't be harvested. or can decrease total catch and cause extremely variable harvest from year to year. There will likely be challenges to aquaculture with climate change. Again, with disease and water quality can impact the success of oyster aquaculture. And more frequent and more intense storms can also cause damage to gear by like ripping out cages and the like. And the combination of these ecological and economic challenges can lead to reduced resilience of coastal systems and communities to withstand climate change. Next slide, please. All right, now for the good news. Oysters can help us adapt. So despite these threats, oysters have the ability to adapt themselves to climate change. They've evolved to live in highly dynamic estuarine systems. They constantly deal with changes in water quality, with storms. They live in relatively wide pH ranges and oxygen levels. And so this kind of ability to withstand all these stressors is why they have been able to persist for millennia. So possible mitigation that oysters can provide is linked to these ecosystem services that they provide. They filter water and sequester nutrients, which can help improve water quality, can minimize or reduce impacts from runoff and harmful algal blooms. Oysters also can stabilize shorelines. So this image here is of an artificial reef that was created to protect a shoreline. And their 3D structure, whether it's with an artificial reef or natural reefs, can help dissipate wave energy and protect shorelines from storms. They can help shorelines to trap sediment to keep shorelines from receding. And the neat thing about oyster reefs is that they are self-building systems, since they grow and settle on, grow on top of themselves. So they can potentially keep pace with sea level rise as they settle and grow in these structures. Oysters can also provide habitat, which is going to be especially important as other habitats for Chesapeake Bay organisms degrade from climate change. Oysters also can provide food security as they are adaptable. They can supplement food sources that are not able to adapt to climate change. So as climate change threatens a number of our food sources, oysters can be kind of this secure source of food as they are able to adapt to some levels of climate change. So combined, these services can provide ecological and economic resilience to Chesapeake Bay communities, which is great news. Next slide, please. So there is hope. Oysters can help us adapt, especially if we continue to invest in protecting and restoring them. And we can help oysters help us adapt to climate change through a variety of efforts. A few of those are listed here on the screen, first of which is restoration, which can help supplement native oyster populations to increase resilience and help with recovery. Restoration can also supplement harvest, and thereby provide food security and can bolster the seafood economy. Another effort is to invest in aquaculture. Aquaculture farmed areas, even if they're farmed to be eaten, there's still more oysters in the water. And so they still provide these ecosystem services just as natural oyster populations do. They serve as a buffer during years of poor harvest of natural oyster populations. And there's a lot of research currently going on into developing disease and ocean acidification resistant genetic strains. We also can designate sanctuaries to help protect healthy populations. Sanctuaries can serve as a source of larvae to the rest of natural populations in challenging years. And healthy reefs also can provide disease resilience. And so they can help, if we protect healthy reefs, they are more likely to be able to resist disease. Next slide, please. So I will just finish up by saying that protecting, restoring, and investing in oysters will lead to a development of more resilient communities and coasts. So with that, I will wrap up my talk. Don't forget to submit your questions in the Q&A below. And now I will pass it back to Allison.
All right. Thank you so much, Jennica and Sean, of course. Everybody, it is not easy to do a webinar presentation that is virtual, where you can't see your audience and you don't know how people are reacting. So show Jennica some love in the chat. Give her a round of applause, a silent round of applause, if you will. And while you're doing that, I am going to announce our giveaway winner. Congratulations to Michelle Kemper. Michelle, I think that you're located in Severna Park. Hooray! Congratulations. You are the winner of the mom's gift card and the ORP hat or t-shirt. We have your contact info and we will be reaching out to get those items to you. So without further ado, we have some time for Q&A with our panelists. And please stick around if you're curious. Don't, be afraid. Submit your questions through the Q&A now. Otherwise, if you'd like to, start your Wednesday evening off, thank you for joining us. And stay tuned for the follow-up email with the link to watch the presentation on YouTube. So, all right, we do have a couple of questions already. Let's bring Sean from Moms on screen. Sean, hey.
Hey.
Hey, okay, great. So Sean, this first question is for you, and it's about purchasing oysters from moms. Do you all offer a locally, Chesapeake Bay raised oyster at your locations?
We do.
At Maryland locations.
Yeah, we partner with True Chesapeake, and you can order them at Mom's and then pick them up at Mom's. And they're actually farmed in the Chesapeake Bay and St. Jerome Creek by True Chesapeake. So you can definitely do that, and then you can bring your shells back and recycle them at Mom's.
Awesome. I'm sure we can find a link that we can share in the chat for people to check that out. So stay tuned for that. Okay. Next question is also related to oyster farming, but maybe our scientists can chime in as well, Olivia and Jennica. So the question is, are farm raised or wild caught / fresh oysters better for you to consume in terms of their nutrient content, their climate change impacts on the oceans, etc.? Is there a difference between farm raised versus wild caught oysters?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll just say for this whole Q&A, I'm going to give it my best go, but as someone both new to the Chesapeake Bay and new to ORP, I will probably kick it back to Olivia to fill in whatever I miss. But I'll say right off the bat, I think it's really important to have both aquaculture and natural populations. As we mentioned, not only does it provide the economic benefits, but it provides also these ecological benefits by kind of buffering the natural population. Since aquaculture farms are in more controlled conditions, you can maybe buffer some impacts that you can't with natural populations. I don't know about nutrients difference. I don't know if anyone here knows that answer. That would be something I'm interested in as well.
Okay, I'll take a stab at that. Yeah, Jennica, you answered that perfectly. I'll just add that in terms of nutrients, essentially keep in mind that aquaculture oysters are typically grown in similar areas that oyster reefs occur naturally. Maybe not the exact same location, but in the same basin. So in terms of their nutrient content and their health for you, they really offer the same, food quality. The thing with aquaculture oysters is that you just get a little bit more information about how the oysters were grown when you consume them. But they're all out in the water in the same or similar locations. So they're really offering the same health benefits. They just offer, different economic benefits to different groups of people.
Awesome. If you heard that mad dash behind the scenes, it's because my computer was about to die. I was rushing to get my charger. I'm so sorry. I don't think I muted. Anyway, we do have some more questions and they're good ones. So this is from Jen Robbie. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It sounds like she's in Louisiana and she's asking, when they see increased flooding and fresh water, they also see an increase in freshwater cyanobacteria. And she's wondering if the Chesapeake Bay experiences HABs or cyanotoxins with floods.
Yes, so just for those who may not know, HABs are harmful algal blooms. So yes, the Chesapeake Bay definitely experiences harmful algal blooms, which are largely as a result of high nutrient runoff. So yes, I don't know if there's any additional things, but short answer, yes, the Chesapeake Bay does experience this issue, and it can be a threat to oysters and other populations in the bay.
That's actually a great segue to the next question, which is how long can oysters tolerate anoxic conditions? Is it hours, days, weeks?
I would guess days, but I will pass that to Olivia if she knows more specifically.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Jennica. Oysters can tolerate really low or no oxygen conditions for more time than other animals like fish. But after a day or two, they're filter feeders, they have gills, they have to breathe, they need oxygen. So they really can't last more than, a couple days or, up to a week in low oxygen conditions. But in anoxic conditions where there's no oxygen available at all in the water, they're really only going to last a couple days.
All right, we've got another question, and I think it's referring to a previous slide, but he's saying this is from Norm O'Foran, and he's saying in the pictured shoreline reef, it looks as though the oysters would be exposed to air for a while. How well do oysters tolerate freezing temperatures?
I will take this off and then pass it off to Olivia to fill in the blanks, but not great. We don't have any intertidal oysters here in Maryland. They're all subtidal, which means they're always under the water. So they're kind of hide away from those freezing conditions, versus if you go down south, you'll see, if you go far south enough, you'll see oysters, intertidal oysters, because it doesn't get quite as cold for quite as long.
Okay.
Yeah, you hit that on the head, Jennica.
So I guess, Olivia, do you remember where that photo, if that, it was, I'm guessing, I think Norm is talking about that artificial reef, which was out of the water. I'm guessing that was somewhere it was warmer, or maybe, yeah, if you know where that picture was from.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head where it's from, but definitely not in Maryland. Like Jennica said, we typically don't see intertidal oysters in Maryland because they can't tolerate those really intense cold spells that we get up here. This winter hasn't been that cold, it's been pretty mild, but if there's still a couple nights that we're below freezing and oysters are exposed to air, they will freeze.
Okay, I have another question for Sean, and the question is about Mom's kind of climate change commitment. What other organizations are you all working with? What kinds of things are you, doing to combat the effects of climate change?
Yeah, thanks, Allison. I appreciate the question. So Moms does a lot to combat climate change. We support all of our employees to volunteer with our partners, and we partner with many organizations like ORP that are addressing either symptoms of climate change, or we also advocate in state legislatures for policies that address climate change directly. So we actually come at it from many different ways, and our organization definitely is behind addressing it aggressively.
Fantastic. Do you want to shout out any other organizations that you might be working with? I don't.
We definitely work with the Chesapeake Bay Alliance. We work with Waterkeepers Chesapeake, which works with all of the waterkeepers in all of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, essentially. Potomac Conservancy. And those are just the ones in basically the DC and the Chesapeake region. We're also in other states and in other areas, and we work with the same types of organizations all over wherever we are.
That's great. We also partner with a lot of waterkeeper organizations for our Marylanders Grow Oysters program. So our friends are friends. Yay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to ask a couple more questions and then we're going to wrap up. But so we've got a specific question about whether oysters filter heavy metals in the bay. And maybe you, Olivia or Jennica, can give a few more specifics on the types of things that oysters filter.
Yeah, they do filter out heavy metals. And I was actually trying to find some specifics. Saw zinc and copper were mentioned. But yeah, they do filter out heavy metals and excess nutrients, which, as we mentioned, with the harmful algal blooms can be a problem. Sedimentation or sediment. Yeah, what am I missing? Those were kind of broad categories. But they filter it all, I think.
And that doesn't mean that they're harmful to eat, correct? How does can someone speak to whether biomagnification is an issue with heavy metals and oysters?
I might take that to Olivia to answer more
Sure.
specifically.
Yeah, so you know, there are reasons that there are areas that are close to shellfish harvest and farming, and that's because those areas have potentially high concentrations of bacteria that come from like sewage wastewater treatment plants or heavy metals, and we don't want people to eat oysters that are infected or that have absorbed those materials. So, you know, yes, oysters can filter heavy metals or toxins from the environment, but you know, that eliminates oysters that are grown in a certain area from, you know, entering the human food chain. But oysters can filter out nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, which are huge polluters in the bay in terms of generating those harmful algal blooms and causing other challenges with overloading nutrients to the system. And that's perfectly healthy and fine for people to eat oysters that are assimilating or sequestering those nutrients into their tissue. We actually want that to happen, and that's a form of improving the water quality. So yeah, so no to heavy, yes, they filter heavy metals, but no, we don't want to eat those.
Important distinction, thank you. Okay, one more question, and it is from someone named Tim Macklin. Has or does ORP ever assist or consult other organizations from other states with setting up oyster shell recycling programs and restoration work?
Yes. Yeah, sorry. There's a train going by, so hopefully you guys can't hear that. So the short answer is yes. ORP is, you know, partnership is in our name. We want to share what we've learned with other organizations and states and groups that are trying to do restoration, recycle shells, and, you know, enhance their oyster resources in their areas. So this is a huge part of our mission, is to set an example and help to facilitate other programs to grow, to, you know, do the same or even better work than us. So Tim, if you have, you know, specific questions, please follow up. I would be happy to talk with you about some more specifics if you're, you know, looking for more information. I can put my email in the chat.
Okay, great. Great. Okay. Well, it is 7:10, and in the interest of everyone, kicking off their Wednesday evening, we're going to wrap up. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Mom's Organic Market again, and give Sean the opportunity to make some closing remarks if you'd like.
Oh, thanks so much, Allison. I just really appreciate being able to support an organization like ORP, and also to be able to support programs like this. Spreading the word about restoring oysters in the bay is really great and Moms really enjoys supporting that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with the recording and some additional resources for you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Wednesday evening, and stay in touch. Good night.